12 when
Yeah,
they,
no
they
kidding.
played that.
Then you're about my age. It's funny. I have to go the other way on that one. I thought Dickinson, maybe in the 90s to late 90s, I think he got a little bit too much control, and I think their creativity kind of waned a little bit. But when Steve Harris was writing the music and the lyrics, and Dickinson was singing those Power Slave, you go back to Somewhere in Time, you go back to those albums were just kick ass. I mean, I think the Dickinson Steve Harris combination was perfect. Once Dickinson started writing the music and the lyrics and stuff, I think it kind of got a little tired for me.
Yeah, I hear you. It did too for me. I know exactly what you're saying, because pretty much after Somewhere in Time, I kind of lost them, and I started listening to more Slayer and getting a little harder and heavier. And
sure,
I kind of got lost from them. But I'll tell you one thing: they did a reunion show here about 4 or 5 years ago with Bruce Dickinson, and I swear the whole state of New Mexico was right in that whole arena, or in that outdoor. Actually, it was an amphitheater. It was pretty intense. It was really cool. But
yeah, that's cool.
Man, dude, it is such an honor to have you on my program, dude. I can't believe it, man. I'm really stoked that you took a few minutes out of your time on a Friday night. I mean, who would want to spend a few minutes on the phone on a Friday night in L.A. with a clone on the radio, man? That's funny. That's pretty cool, though.
Dude, I know that. I don't do a whole lot of this, and I don't get invited to come on a lot of radio programs, so it's tough for me to say no when anybody asks. But I will say this: anyone who gets permanent ink of my boss on their person, I have to bend over backwards to do them favors. It's kind of my rule in life. I mean, you're the only one, but that's my rule in life. If you get a tattoo of Jim Rome anywhere on your body, I will say yes to your radio program whenever.
Nice. I wanted to call into the jungle and pump it up, but I was afraid I didn't want to put any pressure. If something happened and you couldn't make it, I didn't want to hold any expectations up. But regardless, you're on, and that's a great thing. And I got to ask you, Jim is celebrating 15 years of the jungle, man. It's hard to believe that it's been that long. To me, it doesn't seem that long. But what are the big plans for the jungle and for Jim and for all of you guys right now to celebrate that?
You know, it's really funny. It's kind of coming up on us, and I have no idea what Premier Radio has in store. I have a feeling it's going to be something cool. But I think it's kind of a surprise for all of us. But as you know, man, 15 years in this industry is a lifetime and a half. It's incredible that I've been with Jim and the show for 12 years. I mean, most people in this business work on 6 or 7 different shows in 12 years. So I'm blessed, and I thank my lucky stars every day. But to be honest, I don't know what they have in store. I do know that it's a major deal, and that's just 15 years of syndication. Jim goes back another 4 or 5 years doing the local Mighty 690 in San Diego. So he's been on the air even longer than that, which kind of speaks to how well he's done.
Right. And I remember I started listening to Jim Rome about 97. Sports Animal came in about a year or two before that, and I was listening to the Sports Blob and this guy called Lid Dog and all these other weird, crazy shows. But when I got introduced to Romy's show, man, I mean, I'll be honest, and I've told him this before, I didn't like it. It took me the 2 weeks. It took me a little bit longer. But once I became a clone, I was so dedicated. It was like over the top. It was like a Star Trek fan for me. I was like, wow, man, this is intense. This is great media, and that's a cool thing about your guys' your relationship, the XR4TI, which consists of you and KB and Alvin DeLoro and other folks that have been working with Jim Rome for a long time, is how integral you guys are a part of the jungle and how it's all played together. It's family and it's relatable. And I think when we're driving around in our trucks or whatever we're doing, we can relate to you guys and we have a lot of fun. It's kind of a brotherhood, if you will.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head there. I really think that of all the shows out there, I think that Jim and his fans have this incredibly close, special relationship that is devout as well. I mean, I've never really met any fans that are as, devout to their idol or devout to the thing that they follow more than our show. It isn't just kind of a passing thing. We're like, oh, yeah, I listen every once in a while. if you're into the Jim Rome show, you're like in it to win it. And I mean, you're a prime example of that, man. It sounds like you've been listening forever, and you've gone as far as to get the ink and all that stuff. But maybe listeners haven't gone that far, but they kind of celebrate it in their own ways. And it's, I mean, especially now with the social media and the internet and everything else, all you got to do is Google Jim Rome and see all the YouTubes, you see all the message boards, you see all the sites dedicated to the show and all the comments. It's really kind of surreal to see how big this has gotten over the years and how far we still could go,
Right. We're talking to Jason Stewart, a.k.a. J. Stu, from The Jungle, from the Jim Rome Show. Producer, I'm safe to say that's part of your title, right, as well, show contributor and talent coordinator?
Sure. Well, I mean, as you know, the kind of the classical or historic title of producer, the responsibilities is typically to book the guests, and that's what I've been doing for 12 years is booking the guests and making sure that Jim has some of the best names in sports to talk to. So, I mean, I'll never deny that I'm a producer of the program. I guess you could say that Kyle Brandt is the producer, but I'll say that I'm a producer. How's that?
Right. That'll work. How does your story fold into coming into the Jungle? I mean, you were a clone, you were a caller, and then suddenly you're working for Jim Rome. How did that whole thing come about?
Dude, I was just like you and a bunch of other listeners. I was a hardcore listener to the show, and like I said earlier, this was before he was syndicated. This was in 1992 to 1995. I delivered pizzas while putting myself through college at Cal State Fullerton, and Jim was this kind of up-and-coming, kind of brash, kind of young guy that I could relate to. He wasn't much older than me, and I'm like, who is this guy on the radio? And he's just tearing everybody up. He's having a good time. He's putting people on just to kind of sound off. And I'm like, man, I want to do this for a living. And that was my goal in college. I want to be the next Jim Rome. So I would literally call his show once or twice a week. I would be like one of those guys, like, I don't know who today, like Fabian, I think, called today for like the third time in 2 weeks. Yeah. I'd be that guy who would just call, try to get my material out there, try to get noticed by Jim. And he actually, he regarded me enough to invite me to the first Spec Off, which is a now infamous phone call that I flamed miserably. It was a horrible call, but that's kind of how it started. And then in 1999 or 1998, he said over the air, I'm looking to add on to the team, send in a fax resume. At that point, I'd been out of college and working in radio for a couple of years up in the Bay Area. And I'm like, I want in. So I faxed him a resume with a cover letter that said, this is Jason in Fullerton. That guy from Fullerton would love to work on your show. Give me a shot. And I think he had like something like 12,000 resumes faxed to him.
Right, including mine. Luckily, I sent it.
Yeah, luckily with my name being having a little bit of notoriety, it kind of put my name towards the top. He brought me down and interviewed me, and about 6 months later, he gave me the shot. And I've been there ever since. So it's pretty magical. Pretty
That's
great.
Awesome. That's an awesome story, man. That really is cool. For me, getting the tattoo, I get questioned all the time, why'd you get it? I mean, it's very hard for me to really articulate it, but I mean, I did it, and I did it for a reason because I love the show. It's like we were talking about Iron Maiden. I'd go out and get an Iron Maiden tattoo. I've got some of different bands that I represent. It's just really hard to articulate, especially because, people are like, well, it's a sports radio show. Why would you go and do something like that? And it's like, there is no real rhyme or reason. If you love it, you're going to do it, and you're dedicated to it, and that's just the bottom line. And the Clone Nation is amazing, man. It's really, really a camaraderie that I've never seen like before.
Dude, I remember when we went to Albuquerque for the tour stop. When was that? Like, I know you were there. Was it like 2001 or 2002?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And I mean, you guys that was a rabid crowd. I remember it was at a pavilion of some sort outside, right. And the Maloofs were there. Johnny Tapia showed up. It was pretty crazy, man.
Yeah, that's the place where I was telling you Iron Maiden filled up all of New Mexico in that one place. It's like that scene, yeah, it's like that scene from Easy Money where Rodney Dangerfield has a backyard full of people and when they're all partying for his daughter's wedding and stuff. But one more time, we're joined by Jason Stewart, Jay Stu, Wooden and Laconic, the show contributor and one of the producers of the Jim Rome Show. Man, I can't believe I'm talking to you, man. This is so cool. This is really cool. I have another question as far as as being screener. Some of the craziest things or people or comments that you've ever had to deal with, either by clones or even some guests that you have booked. What's that whole experience been like for you?
It's been pretty crazy. In fact, after 12 years, I've become pretty calloused to the callers. I mean, Jim says this all the time, and you need to keep this perspective that of your audience. We have 3 million listeners. Of those 3 million listeners, only 1% of those listeners will call into the show. So you have to keep that perspective. So I try not to group all of our listeners into the kind of the crazy callers that we get. As you know, man, there are callers that do a great job that we love, the Smack-Off invitees, the guys that call up every once in a while do a great job. But then there are the very frustrating callers that call in and try their best to be Jim and try their best to be over the top smack guy, and they flame miserably. But I remember, maybe the most notorious call in the history of our show. I remember how it came up. Some guy called up, and it was just out of nowhere. There was no rhyme or reason to it. And he said, "Hey, man, I just want to go on the air and tell Jim about this encounter that I had with the old Spurs coach, Larry Brown."
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, "Well, tell me the story. What do you want to say to Jim?" And then he goes off and tells this ridiculous story about how he was in the gym locker room and he turned around and saw Larry Brown naked. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is just crazy. So I had to put him on hold. We had to put him up as soon as possible. I'm like, Jim, you got to take this call, man. This is just out there. It's ridiculous. It's funny. Put him on. And the rest is history, man. That call has gone down in infamy so much that we don't even play it anymore.
Yeah.
Just because it's just gotten so negative over time, and we don't really want to represent us that way, and we don't want to represent Larry Brown that way.
Right. You got to play it one more time at least, though. Everybody wants it, In terms of booking, people need to understand that the success of the show lies heavily on you because you're booking, you're chasing the guests, and sometimes people that most people are like, wow, how in the heck is that ever going to happen? And a lot weighs on your shoulders. Kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would never say that I am a huge part of the success of the show. But what I would say is that the guest portion of our program, the interview portion, one of Jim's biggest strengths is interviewing athletes and coaches, and it is my responsibility to get these guys on the show. And I tell people all the time that representing Jim Rome means that I'm going to get into a lot of doors. I'm going to have people answer the phone. I'm going to get answers. Now, having Jim Rome as my boss also means that I'm going to get no's because he's the guy that's going to ask you the tough questions. Right. And as you know, not a lot of athletes like to answer the tough questions. So, yeah, I think a lot of athletes will do the show because it's Jim Rome, because it's a huge forum. It's good for them. But there's going to be a percentage of the athletes all the time that won't do the show because they don't want to face the tough questions.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a challenge for me just to kind of coordinate with the agents, with the teams, with the publicists, and talk them into the feeling that this is going to be a good experience. You do Jim Rome, it's a big deal. Let's do this. And some publicists are like, I don't know, he's going to attack my guy, or he's going to go after my guy. And I'm like, we don't do that. We're just fair. We just do fair interviews. So That's kind of the challenge that I face on a daily basis.
Right.